Well, welcome back into Talking Fitchburg. Joining today for the Fitchburg Historical Society. Actually, she's my co-host because she's been running some great interviews with the Fitchburg Historical Society. It's Katherine Schneider. Katherine, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm doing great.
You know, I think you do a really good job, first off, with the interviews that you've done. Like, you have taken over the Historical Society's piece here when we get together on Talking Fitchburg. So I feel pretty honored that I get to, run an interview with you today because, I mean, you've been knocking it out of the park with all your recent interviews. And we're talking about a fun topic today, early settlements and development in Fitchburg, which I've heard stories. I've heard some things throughout. So I'm hoping to connect some of the dots today between the different guests that we've had on over the years. But there's some interesting pieces here that kind of make or break the settlement of Fitchburg. Am I correct?
Oh, you bet. You bet. So Fitchburg really has had a very interesting history, and we want to highlight that through the next few months. But today I'd like to take people way back in Fitchburg history, early history. First of all, to acknowledge the first humans, of course, were our Native Americans, and they left a pretty light footprint, actually. Would have been some of the Indian early Native American trails would have been running north and south, like where Seminole Highway is now and where Fish Hatchery Road are. Early trails that actually have become major roads through Fitchburg today. So the Winnebago, we now would say Ho-Chunk tribe, was prominent in Fitchburg and would, make camp by where there would be water, principally. That makes absolute sense for fishing and hunting. So I wanted to acknowledge that first. The farming pioneers started coming in the 1840s and found beautiful land here in Fitchburg. In fact, one of the early pioneers was William Vroman, and he has a description of Fitchburg, what it looked like when these early farmers came. And he said he described Fitchburg as one of the best agricultural towns in the county. The soil is very rich and climate healthy. So obviously he loved what he saw when he came here. So the pioneers began arriving in pretty great numbers then, long 1840s through 1860s, purchasing land from the government. And wheat was really their first crop that they grew here. But interestingly enough, over the years, you might think of those early years as being primarily agriculture in Fitchburg, and they were, but there were also a village and several settlements in the boundaries of Fitchburg in those early years. So when we look back from 2022, it's kind of amazing to think about all that was here very early on, actually. So in the last half of the 1800s and the first years of the 20th century, Fitchburg actually had, get this, 5 post offices, 12 schools, 3 churches, and lots of taverns and stores and businesses. So I'd like to talk about where those places were located and why they came to be and why they were important. I think the first thing to think about is like transportation through Fitchburg. So early days, it was stagecoach, stagecoach stops through Fitchburg, going to other places or serving the people within Fitchburg, the farming community. So there were 3 community centers in those early days from the 1840s through, say, about the 1870s. Oak Hall was probably the most prominent, and was located at the corner of Highway M and Fish Hatchery Road. So you can kind of see where that would be a major crossroads. So stagecoaches would stop there to get water for their oxen and their horses. And then, of course, find a place to sleep and get nourishment, food for the night. Sort of like a modern B&B. And so mail and passengers went through there. And interestingly enough, from Madison, from that location to Madison was just a nice, easy half-day's journey. So it was an easy stop over there. And then people would travel like to Mount Vernon and places south from that location too. So they had there a post office and a blacksmith shop. And get this, they would have bands that would come in from as far away as Evansville to entertain people because they had, dancing and entertainment for the farming community. So definitely a major community center in Fitchburg in those early years. Another community center, or we would call it maybe a settlement, was Lakeview, and that was another stagecoach stop. Lakeview is located in the eastern part of Fitchburg. That's at the intersection of MM and B. So it's really on the way to Oregon to the south and then Madison to the north. So around 1860, so if you can picture this 150 plus years ago, they had a hotel and a tavern, shoemaker shop, post office, blacksmith shop, and a general store. And also a dance hall. So, where would people go for dances? To Lakeview. So very, and again, for Eastern Fitchburg, a very prominent place, settlement. And then the third settlement during the stagecoach era was called, get ready for this, Dogtown. Dogtown was at the intersection of Fish Hatchery and Lacey Road, kind of at the same intersection where now City Hall is and the library. So you can see where they would have a stagecoach stop there also. So that had a meat market, blacksmith shop, general store, and Dogtown School. It was Fish Hatchery School, but also was fondly known as Dogtown School too. So there's a couple of stories about why it was called Dogtown. One story has it that because there were so many prairie dogs in Fitchburg, obviously being a prairie, that Dogtown, Prairie Dogtown, was the name of that area. Another story is with the meat market that they used to throw the bones out the back door. And so the dogs would gather to get a treat. So a couple stories about the origin of that name, Dogtown. So the next major change in Fitchburg as far as creating new communities was the railroad era. Stagecoaches dropped by the wayside as the railroads came in with much more efficient, faster means of communication. They could provide farmers with just an added access to the markets for their wheat and their dairy products and their livestock. So there were two major rail lines that came through Fitchburg in the late 1800s. One was the Chicago and Northwestern rail line that came through Eastern Fitchburg. And that depot was located, they had a depot at Syene. And then the second one was the Illinois Central, which interestingly enough came through the center part of Fitchburg. And at the Syene station in the northeast part of Fitchburg, that was really a center for commerce from about late 1800s to about 1926. So you could go north to Madison and then southbound too, as far as Chicago. They had a post office, grocery store, creamery, stockyard, a blacksmith shop. So all those things were located there. They also had, the Syene community had Swan Creek Methodist Church, and they also had Swan Creek School located close to the church. So there was a lot happening in that around that Syene station location. Then there was the first, like we would call Fitchburg Village, and that was brought about also by the railroad. In 1887, the Illinois Central ran a line through the center of Fitchburg, running from Madison to Freeport, Illinois. And they brought mail and baggage service, passenger service, and freight trains, of course, to carry goods. So that was a new center for trade in Fitchburg, and the depot station was located at Fitchburg Village on Went Road. So that's in the southern part of Fitchburg, just about to Highway M, intersecting with Highway M. And that's where the Badger Bike Trail is now. runs right through there. So the small village that grew up around that depot was larger than the Saline settlement. And so it had a grocery store, post office, blacksmith shop, Lutheran church, Lapley Brothers feed mill, lumber and coal yard, and an implement dealership, all located right there in Fitchburg Village. There was a secondary station, milk station located pickup where the milk, farmer's milk could be picked up on Stoner's Prairie, which was right near Lacey Road. So not just the farmer's milk was picked up there, but you could also catch the train as a passenger if you wanted to go into Madison or point south. So mass transit was pretty readily available in Fitchburg at that time in several locations. So the Illinois Central station closed in Fitchburg Village in about 1926. And so the settlement declined at that time. And the mural on the second floor of the library depicts that village in the early 1900s. So it's fun when you go into the library to look at that and picture how that village would have looked at that time. Well, of course, the railroad business then declined when automobiles came in and trucking and so on. So that was in the 1920s. But I'd just like to say, as I stop today at that point in Fitchburg's history, that there was a lot happening in terms of these settlements of goods going in and out of Fitchburg, people going in and out of Fitchburg. It was really a connector, these settlements, these railroad depots. A lot was happening in Fitchburg. It was not an isolated community. So I think that realizing that even early on, Fitchburg had a lot going on. So that's the story of early, just a brief brushstroke of early Fitchburg, Jeremy.
First off, the mural at the second part of the library showing the road location with the train depot and everything. You're right. That puts you in the mindset of what that was like, in there. And I like the fact that the villages, you really can follow that today when you're talking about Saline Road, when you're talking about Seminole Highway, taking the bike path. And there's some signage out there that talks about some of the stuff here that you're referencing. But I like that all of them had a blacksmith. I like all of them had some type of store or tavern. And the hall thing is very interesting to me. I think that it's just something fun to talk about, and something I would love to explore a little bit more on is what was happening at the halls, the weddings, the events, if you will, and then the development continued. And it's crazy when you think of how fast things have changed over the years too. It doesn't seem fast when you're talking out, but when you really think about it, the stagecoach thing wasn't that long ago, and here we are in a different age, not sure what the next direction. Where's my flying car that comes out of Fitchburg?
Well, I think those means of transportation made a huge difference in how Fitchburg developed. You can see those settlements move from one location to another, depending on what was going on in terms of transportation and how important that was, and also the central place of gathering for community. Also, that comes through loud and clear, that people want to gather together. So not only transportation in and out of Fitchburg, but forming community and being together. All of that is part of being human.
It is. And I will also, from here on out, it will no longer be the city campus, but Dogtown here on our city campus. So it's been designated by said Jeremy Crosby, a pioneer in his own right, because of Katherine Schneider and the Fitchburg Historical Society. Katherine, great information. We'll check back in with you next month and continue the discussions from there. Appreciate your time. And if people want to learn more about the Historical Society and all the great work you guys are doing, how can they find out?
Oh, Fitchburg Historical Society. We are housed in the Fitchburg Library, Dogtown corner there, intersection, Fitchburg Library. We're on the second floor. People can locate us. Really, our website is readily available to anyone through computer, and that's fitchburghistory.org. So please feel free to contact us anytime. We love taking questions, hearing comments, and we'll just be continuing this series on the development of Fitchburg. So more to come.
I want my Dogtown t-shirt by the next time, or mug by the next time we meet up. So make that happen, Catherine. Okay.
All right, Jeremy.
All right. As Catherine said, check out the website if you haven't, or stop by on the second floor of the Fitchburg Public Library and check out the Historical Society's setup there. It's awesome. We'll take a quick break. More to come. You're watching Talking Fitchburg from Dogtown.